AI assessment and planning is the structured pre-work before you build or launch any AI initiative. It answers two questions up front. Is your company actually ready for AI? And which initiatives would be the best fit for your business right now? As a leader, the last thing that you want is to invest in AI that delivers no use for your business. So we never want to start with the tools. We want to start with an assessment first mindset. So in this session, we're pulling back the curtain on what AI assessment and planning looks like before you pilot anything. Joining me today are my colleagues Julia, Brian, Luis, and Matt, a panel of Valere experts who do this work every day. They go into organizations and evaluate AI readiness. They validate the exact AI projects that are going to deliver business results. So I brought them in because I want them to help show you how they actually do it. What is it that they look for? And they're going to give you some examples of what real assessments have looked like inside of some companies that they have worked with. But the biggest thing that I want you to take with you is that the assessment is a step that you do not skip. If you finish today's module and you think, all right, got it, makes sense, but we don't need this assessment, let's just move forward with our AI initiative X, well, you're starting from a flawed premise. You're going to pay for it later. Now, some organizations outsource this work. They partner with external agencies like my colleagues here who would come in and study your workplace. But if you want to take on this work and do it yourself, today we're going to walk you through exactly how we approach it so that now you have a framework or a model to follow. So before I get into our panel, the four pillars that we assess are we look at people, process, technology, and data. So looking at the current skills and the AI literacy of your people, mapping the workflows to find bottlenecks, checking if your current systems can even talk to an AI, and analyzing not only the quality but the accessibility of the data, because the data really is the fuel for the AI. The assessment and planning methodology that we use is this three-stage process. Data collection from stakeholders, and that happens with both surveys and interviews, analysis and prioritization, and then the final deliverable in the form of an AI transformation playbook. So let's start with why an assessment. In the last video, we talked about the top mistakes that we can learn from the companies whose AI initiatives ended up failing. And so what red flags, guys, are you seeing in the field that tell you that this step is being overlooked?
What I see these days is that most businesses don't fully understand the value of starting with a true AI assessment. Business leaders see shiny tools and then hand them off to their employees and say, go work with them.
So many AI pilots fail once they're actually rolled out to the whole company because management would make decisions without really even understanding how the rest of the workforce works. Without understanding how a designer works, how an engineer works, how a project manager works. To them, it just sounds like, hey, this is such a great solution. Let's roll it out. And so that's why it fails.
Because it's one thing if you're slapping AI tools onto broken processes, it's just going to regurgitate poor data, poor results.
When you try to automate something that is a mess, what you get is an automated mess. If you look at why AI projects actually succeed, is because they were not guessing what the AI will do, but you're actually plugging the technology in a place where it will increase the value.
You never want to solve a problem with too many assumptions. You want it to be data-driven and grounded in truth. What am I trying to solve? And also, what do I know about the different technology in my industry and that is available to me? When you can understand the core of a problem, you can really come up with the best way to solve it.
Because even if you have the best technology, if you are not implementing it in a way that is organized, then you are still failing.
Not truly understanding current business flows. So ultimately, we start with that current state assessment, that detailed analysis of the organization's existing capabilities. It helps identify current workflows, bottlenecks in the current operation, and where those processes could be fragmented or maybe not as effective as they could be.
So what I'm hearing is that leaders are often rushing to pilot an idea. It's an idea they got in the shower or a platform that a vendor sold them, and they're not really stepping back to study the business to even know, would AI make a difference here? Or did we just plug it into some wrong problem that's not even going to give us a measurable return? So leaders who want to lead an AI-first company, they've got to have this assessment-first mindset. So guys, what if a leader says, okay, that sounds nice, but doing this pre-work is a waste of my time. I'm going to go ahead and buy this tool. I'm going to go ahead and build an automation because I'm the owner of the business. and I already know where AI can fix my business. What would you say to them?
I think maybe it takes a little bit of humility to understand that you might be the owner of the business, but that doesn't mean you know how all of it runs, right? It's important to understand how, each of your departments work. And for that, you have to talk with them, right? And I think having that humility, above all, having empathy and humility in this day and age of AI, right, where there's a new model every day, there's a new framework every day. I think we should really embrace that human element of being empathetic to our staff, being empathetic to the people that are working with us, but also being humble and recognizing that we don't know it all. We're never going to know it all. Uh, and we should really embrace on trying to get everybody involved, because as somebody in management, I'm probably not the one that's going to be using this pilot, right? It's going to be the mid-senior full stack engineer that's going to be using this pilot, right? So it would behoove me to consult them, right? To ask them to see what pain points they have, what needs do they have, what bothers them the most. So before we even start thinking about, I'm going to get my pilot all the way to production and then everybody's going to use it, we need to take a step back and recognize that we need to, I guess, be more, I don't know if that's the right word, egalitarian in this process and trying to include everybody, right? Because management is going to be the one to suffer when it's not adopted.
Okay, so getting back to the assessment and planning methodology that we use with our clients, this process is designed, as Brian just said, to be inclusive and to involve everybody from your managers to your mid-level staff to make sure that AI is adopted right. So I've simplified this here on your screen as 3 stages. Of course, the scope of the work that we do when we go in is much more complex, but for the sake of giving you today the basic framework, let's look at these 3 stages. Okay, so as I said, first is talking to your people, hearing from your stakeholders. So right here, we recommend 2 actions: surveys first and then interviews. Let's start with surveys, Julia.
The first stage is that we send this 5 to 10 minute long survey to anybody and everybody at your company that you think would be important to get information from. We highly suggest sending this to everyone so we can get as many impressions and different perspectives as possible. We collect all this information and we're able to assess off the bat what are reoccurring themes.
It really goes back to identifying where business workflows are broken.
So why is it that you start with the survey first, and then how does that lead into the interview phase?
The reason these surveys are a very important first step is so, one, we can identify who are some key players that we need to talk to and learn more information from. We may learn that the finance team is a perfect, well-oiled machine. They don't have a lot of pain points. They don't need a lot of help. Whereas maybe the product team is going through a lot of change. Once we go to that interview stage, everybody is prepared in a sense that the person that we are interviewing is not going to be caught off guard because they've done the survey and they know what the conversation is going to be centered around. So now we know where to dig deeper and the right questions to ask. It's really important to know the right questions to ask so that we can actually get value out of the conversation for when we are coming up with solutions.
Now, in addition to those surveys that you talked about, one of the things that we do at Valere when we work with clients is we do an AI-powered interview using a tool that we built called Dactic. So what Julia's talking about there when she says interviews, she's talking about those selective face-to-face stakeholder interviews, those most important, let's say 5 to 15 key stakeholders that you really want to speak to face-to-face. But Dactic is a step that you could insert along with the survey process. So like Julia said, she recommended you should send this out to everybody, anybody and everybody in the company, because the more information, the better. Unfortunately, if you had to interview everybody, nobody has time to sit down for hours and do that. So Dactic is the bridge that we built, which would allow you to send out an automated interview tool. So the way that it works is we start, of course, by defining the topic that we want to research. And then Dactic is going to go out and interview your people really asynchronously, so they can schedule those interviews anytime that they want. It uses an AI interviewer that speaks to them in natural language. So for your team, it just feels like they're having a regular video chat. They're not filling out a form or having to type anything. They just talk. But that interviewer is not just asking static survey questions, it's listening and it's adapting on the fly. So let's say one of your employees said, okay, our invoice process is a mess. Well, then Dactic wouldn't just stop there. It would pivot and it would say, hey, can you walk me through the specific steps where it breaks? Okay. And then after that, the last step is that it synthesizes those conversations into a structured report that we could then use to inform the rest of the assessment.
So the value in using automated interviews, it really boils down to being able to streamline the assessment and get a comprehensive evaluation of the employees across all the different departments of the business, and ultimately not having to spend time on the surface level material. That way, manually, we can spend time diving deeper into the true optimal use cases and spend time having the conversations that truly matter with the key stakeholders.
So, Matt, whenever you have those key stakeholder conversations, I'd like to hear an example of maybe a past assessment and planning project that you worked on. And specifically, by doing this assessment and taking the time to talk to all of those people, what is it that you were able to gather? And if you could give me some concrete data and numbers, that would be great.
A recent AI assessment and planning phase that we conducted at Valere was with a real estate brokerage firm. They walked us through their processes, and we identified multiple challenges within their workflow. I'll start with the sales department, spending 2 to 3 hours daily on pausing and unpausing leads through 4 to 6 different systems for each payments. The business impact was pretty large. It was resulting in nearly $175 million in missed sales annually. Leads would ultimately close with competitors, and the root cause of this was inconsistent agent follow-up because of the manual burden that the pausing and unpausing of the leads in their system was dependent on. And in the operations department, they were spending anywhere from 5 to 6 hours daily extracting data from different documents, 20 plus hours weekly coordinating payments across teams, 12 hours day to day auditing contracts. And that frustration really boiled down to the settlement statements all being formatted differently, having to implement the same information 4 to 6 times in different systems. So we were able to provide them with some solutions in the form of automated agents for lead pausing and unpausing through Slack API integration, intelligent lead distribution algorithms. We also were able to provide them with a solution of delivering hands-on workshops and also role-specific training sessions focused on prompt engineering for their existing tools such as ChatGPT.
Each of those examples that you gave there, they were grounded in numbers. You had receipts. You could trace everything back to some documented evidence or some metrics, right? So you could verify that there was real operational pain inside the business. So now we can see how those things rose up to the surface as contenders for AI use cases. You've got this short list of possible situations. And so now what I'm curious about is let's talk about the final stage, stage 3, which is that final deliverable.
After the individual interviews, our team creates a playbook for the client. And then from there, we give them around 7 different minimum solutions, and we rank them by the type of solutions they are for short-term, medium-term, and long-term wins. All these solutions are all centered around the AI assessment surveys that everyone completed, as well as the individual interviews that we conducted to actually solve the core problem, not just put a Band-Aid on a problem with assumptions.
So the goal of the assessment is to move from, let's say, 20 ideas down to the 3, or you said maybe even up to 7 that actually really matter. Because obviously I can imagine after all those surveys, after talking to all those people, hours and hours and hours of conversations, you will end up with 20 different directions that the business can go. But obviously, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And there's not time or budget to do all 20. So when you compile all of your findings into a playbook, what we're recommending is that you use what's called a prioritization opportunity matrix, it's just an ROI map. All right. This is a visual framework used to determine which AI initiatives you should tackle first. Since you can't implement every potential use case at once, this map is going to help you identify where to start by plotting those projects against two variables. So here's the breakdown. Let's look at the two axes here. So the bottom axis is the level of effort. So this measures things like the cost and the complexity that's required to implement this solution. It accounts for the time and the money and the technical difficulty that would be involved in getting this project off the ground. The goal is you want to keep this metric as low as possible for your initial projects. The other axis, up and down, is the return on investment. So obviously this is money, but it could also be hours saved. It could, like I said, dollars generated, but it could also be just intangible terms like how did it directly support the organization's mission. So you want this to be as high as possible. The sweet spot as you plot each of your use cases is to find the AI projects that land in the top right corner of that map, because that quadrant represents initiatives that are highest impact, highest ROI, but lowest effort. Okay. And the reason why that matters to do this exercise is that the stuff that is going to be in this quadrant is going to give you immediate value, but it's not going to bog your team down in months and months of complex development. So think about these like your quick wins. They're going to build momentum for the more complex initiatives that you may want to tackle in later phases.
I think it's very helpful to get a visual sense of where the use cases fall in terms of ROI and also ease of implementation. That light blue square in the matrix.
So you finished your assessment, you've interviewed your team, you have a short list of AI use cases that you have validated, you've compiled your findings into this playbook, sorted them by priority. Now, the most dangerous thing that you could do is just trying everything at once. So I want you to let this be your permission that you're going to follow a crawl, walk, run framework. Crawl is that you look at that prioritization matrix that we built and pick one pilot, the quick win probably something from the top right corner, and you test that out with a small team to prove that it actually creates impact. Once that pilot's proven, then you expand. You organize your data, you expand to more departments, you can add on some slightly more complex workflows, and then finally you scale. This is where you start to integrate all those isolated tools into a full system that transforms how the business operates. And that system design is where we're going to be headed in the next few lessons. Let's wrap up today with a discussion question. I want you to drop a comment near this video. You'll see a comment button. And by the way, throughout the course, you're going to be asked to do this, to chime in and to share your perspective on these topics with your peers who are also learning alongside you. Remember, anything that's in the learning guide, the worksheets, the resources, those are optional. You want to use those at your leisure. But in order to get credit for completing this course, to receive your certificate at the end, anytime we do these discussion questions where you have to leave a comment on the video, that part is required. Okay, so here it is. I want you to respond. You can just type out these sentences and finish the sentences in a comment. So number one is related to a current initiative. I want you to say an AI solution or an initiative that we are currently implementing. And if you're not, you could just say, or that I've recently considered piloting, and then tell us about that AI project. And then part B, I want you to say, regarding this assessment process, how would you rate your organization on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best, in terms of how much effort you guys put into this AI assessment and planning process before you launched the project? And it's okay, whatever you score yourself, just be honest. And I want you to explain why. Okay, why'd you give yourself that score? And then C is next steps. So one thing that you learned today that you want to explore more deeply before we move forward is, all right? So go ahead and leave that comment. And coming up, once you've gone through the assessment process, how do you actually build out this AI solution? We're going to move into designing a cohesive AI system. That's coming up in the next session.